me to introduce myself.
那请允许我先介绍一下自己。我硕士毕业于哥伦比亚大学教育学
From the
院，
School of
毕业后呢，
Education,
在大学
Columbia
学跨文化
University,
创造
and
紫微路进化
after
深造。
returning to China,
这是
I
一项将传
co-founded
统文化
Ziweilu
创新
Gap Year
与现代教育
Education,
理念深度融
which
合，并
integrates
通过
core
全方
values
位
of
加强思
traditional
想准
Chinese
备，传
education
播
with
中国式
modern
现代教育
education.
的理念。
We want to
那
promote
今天
the
由我
idea
为
of
主持人，还有
Chinese
主持人
style
团队的成员，请
competence-oriented
微微也先介
education.
绍一下自己。
I'm joined here
大
today
家
by
好，
the
我叫
other
谭
host,
薇薇，
Tan
目前在
Weiwei.
哈佛大学公主人类
Hello
学教育
everyone,
的硕
my
士，
name is Tan
中
Weiwei.
英
I'm
学生
currently
也是将
pursuing a
实践的
master's in
宏观
human
的文化
development
教育
and
理念来
education at
研究与
Harvard.
应用，并
As
希
both
望
a
将文化
student
和
and
多元与知
educator,
识相互
I
融
want
合，
to
非常高
combine
兴能在这样一个
cross-cultural
多元的
education
场
and
合
language
与大家一起
development.
探讨在这个
It's
纷
my
繁多
pleasure
变的
to
时代，
start the
如何更加
conversation
深入
with
的理
you
解
to
语言、文
discuss
化与
how
人
we
的
can
关系。
understand the connection between culture, language, and people. Thank you.
好的，谢谢微微。
Thank you, Weiwei.
在全球化加速与文化多样性日益凸显的
In
今天，
today's
多语言教育
globalizing
模式
world,
不仅是帮助学
multilingual
生
education
更好地
is
建
not
立文化
only
认同，
about
跨文化理
mastering
解还有
communication
社会包
tools,
容的关键因
it's
素。
about
它能
fostering
够在
cultural
语教中
identity
实
and
现
cross-cultural
文化与语
understanding.
言的双向
So
并
how
存，
can we
如何利用科
realize
技打
the
破语言
inheritance
教育
of
的壁
culture
垒？
and language,
本
and how
次论坛
can we
我们就
break the
围绕
boundaries
系列节
between
目
language
嘉宾，
educations
他
with
们将从不
technology?
同的角度为
We have
我们
invited
深入的
4
思考。
guest speakers who will share their insights from unique
那请允许我
perspectives.
为大家先介绍一下今天莅临分享的嘉宾。
Please allow me to introduce the guest speakers today.
他们是上海纽约大学中文语言高级讲师柴金老
Professor
师，
Chai Jing, Senior
美
Lecturer
国
of
纽约
Chinese
福特城大
Language
学
at
语言
NYU
学专科
Shanghai,
教授洪昭
Professor
辉
Hong
教授，
Zhaohui, Tenured Professor of
美
History
国人
at
民大
Fordham
学心理学讲
University,
师，清华大学
Professor
新
Hu
闻科学实
Xiaomeng,
验室主
Lecturer
任顾
of
问胡晓
Psychology at
萌老
Renmin
师，
University
以
and
及清华
Scientific
密歇根大
Advisor
学
to Tsinghua
人文社科
University's
学院
Happiness
孙仲武老
Technology
师
Lab
是高级
and
副讲
Professor
人
Bin
兼
Zhou,
教授。
Associate Professor of
那么稍
Applied
后在座
Linguistics
嘉宾
at
分享的
Xi'an
节
Jiaotong
目，
Liverpool
会对每位嘉
University.
宾的研究领域
So
做更
before
加
we
详细的介
start,
绍，
we
请大
will
家
give
期
a
待。
brief and introduction for
那
their
现在呢，就
research
让我们共
before
同
each
回
of them
顾
give a speech.
语言和
So
价
now
值
let
成
us
为文明沟通的
collectively
第三条路
explore the
径，
question,
现在即将
can
揭晓。
education become the third language that
那么
enables
今天呢，我们
civilization
会
to
先请4位
coexist?
嘉宾从不同的领域进行个人分享，
We will
随后进入
invite
圆
the
桌论坛的
speakers to
环节。
give an
嘉
individual
宾们
speech
一起
and
探
then
讨
we
事
will
项
have a
当中最关
roundtable
心的问题。
discussion. We
在
will
此期
talk
间，
about
观众朋友们呢
topics
也
that
可以
are
对观
most
众在
concerned.
观众群里进行提问，我们的工作
You
人员
can
会提
raise
供适时的
questions
及时
in the
建议。
chat groups, and our
那接下
volunteer
来
will
就让我们
collect
有
the
请今天
questions
的
for
第一位
further
嘉宾，
discussion. Now
他
let's
现任中国
invite the
人民大
first
学
guest
心理
speaker,
学系讲师，同
Hu
时担任
Xiaomeng,
清
the
华大学
associate
心理学系
professor
实验
at
室主任
Renmin
顾问，
University of
中国心
China
理学
and
会文化
scientific
与心理学家
advisor
为委
in
员会，
Happiness
以及
Technology
中南
Lab
大
at
学大
Tsinghua
学
University Cultural
文
Psychology
化
Special
研
Committee.
究，
Her
关
research
注文
spans
化与
cultural
多元文化。
psychology, moral psychology, and cross-cultural
探讨
studies.
多元化
She
差异与
explores
文化
how
冲突
culture
营造
shapes
出共同
individual
因子，
psychology
并进
and
行分析。
investigates
4
how
方面的
multicultural and moral
对
costs
比。
in
以下洪
international.
老师与我们分享
Now
文化
let's
如
give the
何影
floor
响个体
to
的认知与行为，以及如何胜
Dr.
任
Hu
多元化
Xiaomeng.
的社会。
She will talk about
好
how
的，
to adapt
谢
to
谢。
a multicultural
听到我
world.
的声音吗？
Thank you.
可以的。
好的，各位老师、各位同学、各位正在看直播的亲爱的朋友
Dear
们，大家
audience,
好！今天非常荣幸，也非常高兴
welcome.
能够有这
It's my
个非常
pleasure
宝贵的
to
机
have
会，
this
能够跟各位
opportunity
朋友来分享和交流一下这个我们的心理学啊，尤
to
其
share
是
my
文化心理
insights
学，
about cultural
它对于我们每
psychology
个人的生活、工
and
作、
how
学
it
习、人
relates
际
to
关
each
系、人
of
际
our
关系，
lives,
以及我们
including
在
our
适应
career,
我
our
们多元文
intimate
化经历中
relationship,
的
and
付出和
cultural
成本，以
adaptation.
及如
I
何
will
提
also
高我
talk
们人
about
类的福祉
the
和素质，
benefits
还都有
and
哪些价
costs of
值，如何
multicultural
与这
experience,
些融
how
合
it
为
improves
主，
our well-being
对
and
我们有
happiness,
什么帮
what
助？
are its
那
meanings,
因为
and
今
how
天
can might help
看
us.
到了时间有限，所以可能我会
I only have
分享
limited
一
time
些
today, so I will
非常
choose
欢
some
迎
key
所
points
有
to
听
talk
直播的
about,
朋友
but
们，大家可以通过
for all the
搜索其他的
audience,
一些
please feel
途径
free
来
to
和我保
come contact me through my email address.
我今天分享的
I'm looking forward to launch three beauties to a world
一个复杂的局势
with
如何能够去整合
complex situations,
每个人他
and how can we
这个多元文化的优势
integrate the multicultural resources we have,
文化适应当中可能出现的一些
and how can we
或者一些
reduce the side effect or conflicts in the process of cultural adaptation.
那么大家肯定会特别好奇啊，就是
So you might be curious when you look at the topic. So what are the three beauties of cultural psychology? Let me give you a hint. The three beauties
尤其是文化心理学的这样一种体悟和感慨
is my understanding after learning psychology for over 20 years. So there are three beauties. The first one is the beauty of experiment in natural sciences. We have strong backing from the first beauty. The second beauty is the beauty of humanities.
非常丰富多彩动态的这样一个心理的现象和心理的
Everyone has dynamic psychological processes.
这种复杂的交织的心理现象，把它简化成数据或者说
We cannot simplify this dynamic, complicated process into data or principles. So it involves humanities, including literature, history, and philosophy. So this is the second beauty. The third beauty is the broader beauty of social sciences. Psychology do not only concern about interpersonal relations and intra-group dynamics.
群体和群体之间的关系包括积极的关系，比如
including positive relationship between groups, even war. So we have this
这样一个宏大叙的三种美。那么
point of view in social sciences.
下一章，请播一下 PPT。那么下面呢，我就跟大家非常简略的去分享一
So
下。
I will now briefly talk about
这样一个全球化与
the outline.
我们既有
So in the age of globalization and anti-global multiple perspectives, and including different political ideology. So against this backdrop, why culture psychology is important? Why does it matter?
国家的治理，我们个体每个
Our
人的
group
生活
conflicts and our own well-being as individuals. Why it matters to all of us.
非常有意义
Second, we have done some interesting research at Renmin University. I have set up a cultural psychology lab. So I will talk about our interesting research. In the third part, I will provide you with our multicultural world.
地球上的这80亿人，240多国家和地区，大洲三亚，我们人类，他
everyone inhabiting the
你读什么
what
文
we
史哲、
read,
艺术或者作
art
品啊。那么在这个比较 spiritual level，
at the
比较
spiritual
抽象的
level.
level 呢，就可能是我们的价值观、我们的宗教
We
信仰、
might
我们
think
的
of
形象
our
等等，这些
values
都是
and
文化的
religious
能够表
belief.
现的载体
These
和
can
形
all
式。
be considered as a form of culture.
所以 culture has many
So
方
culture
式，
has
它可以
many
也是
forms.
比较深层次的
They can be your way
价
of
值观
life
你的世界观、人生观
or
以
your
及
values,
ideal
your
所以
worldview, and even your ideology.
所以 culture psychology 大家肯定会实际上
So you might be
它
curious.
是在它
It
是
is
接
a
受了一点
branch
我
of
想
scientific
文化差异，所以可以这么来理解，就我们是 similar 的，但同时呢，我们又是文化
across the globe, and we need to have more cross-cultural communication and cooperation.
最后就是给大家推荐几本书
，So these are the books I'd like
以上
to
就是我的分
recommend to
享，然
you.
后因为时
So
间
that's all for my speech. Due to time constraints, I haven't been able to cover everything, but feel free to contact me for further cooperation and communication. And I hope that you can benefit from learning
好
psychology.
的，
Thank
非
you.
常感谢胡老师的分享。
Thank you
那
very
在
much
有限
for
的时
your
间里，但是您
insights.
的研究让我们更加
Your
深入地
research
理
has
解了
deepened
文化
our
和多
understanding
元
of
的
how
心理和行为，
culture
也为跨文
shapes
化
the
教育提供了
human
新的思考角度。那在
psychological
探讨文
development,
化对个体的影
and
响
it
后，
provides
现在
new
让我们
insights
从
for
文化
cross-cultural
能力和不同
education.
英语教学的角
Now,
度
let's
探讨
think
在
about
AI
how
在教
AI
育
can
和文化
empower
创新
language
方面的
education and how it can be innovatively applied in
那么现在就
multicultural
让我们有
education.
请西交利物浦大学人文社科
Let's
学院
welcome
英语语言
Professor
学系高级副教
Zhou
授、英国利物浦
from
大学博士生导师邹斌教授。邹教授长期
Xijiao
深耕
Liverpool
于中文
University.
与英语教育领域，围绕 AI 如何促
His
进语言
interests
学习展
include
开深
how
入研
AI
究，并
facilitate
开发了
language
语言认
learning,
证当中
and
的
he
多语
has
评测与练习
developed
系统，
a
对多语教育
system
提
to
供了系统化
evaluate
的解决方案。
English
那接
speaking
下
and
来就让我
writing.
有请
He
邹
has
斌教授
provided
带来他的分享。
innovative solutions for language teaching.
好
Now let's
各
welcome
位老
Professor
师
Zhou
各
Bin.
位同学，大家好非常高兴有这样一次机会这个
Hello
能够跟大
everyone.
家分享一
It's
下
my
如
pleasure
何
to
呢
have this
在语言
opportunity
教学
to
中
talk
进行
about how AI
也
can
非常
be
感谢主办方
applied
的邀请
into language teaching.
那么为什么说这个人工智能在语言教学上，包括我们在多语研究中能够赋能我们的语
In
言教
language
学
learning and
请看下一个
multilinguistic study, AI can empower our
那么
teaching
在
process.
教育技术发展的这30-40年当中呢，
Over
实
the
际上
past 3
在
to
生成
4
式 AI 出现
decades,
之前，
before
我
the
们的教育技
emergence
术
of
呢
generative
其实
AI,
虽然在各个教育领域，特别是语言教学中、多语教学中起到了一定作
computer
用，但是
technology
没
has
有那
played
么
its
大
role in
那么只是因为
education,
少
but
数
it's not
的
that
语
influential.
言教师
Only a
来探讨
minority
相
of
关的
teachers have
计算机技
discussed
术与
how
语
computer
言教学，
technologies
包括
can be
这个
applied to language
二层
teaching,
移动学
including
习
Web
AI， 但实际上
1.0,
AI 应
Web
该在
2.0,
2010年代
mobile
出
learning.
现了，那时候是语
AI
音自动
emerged
自动
in
写作自动检
2010,
测，
but it
那
was
么到
only
了后
used
期的
for
模板和计算
pronunciation
机带来
and
的
writing
大数据
automatic
等等。
evolution.
那么到
And
了
later,
年
we have big
10月
data
开始的
and
生
all
成式
other
AI
technologies.
以及
In
第一阶段
2022,
到了
we have the
第二
first
阶段，
generation of
到了
generative
第
AI.
第三阶段，那么一大批
And now we have
语言模
entered
型
the
都
third phase
应用
of
到了
generative
这个语
AI.
言教学当
A
中，
large number
特
of
别
large
是英
language
语
models
这个
have
也特
been
别火热，
applied to
包括我
language
们对于
teaching,
这个
especially
国外的
English
这些
teaching.
GPT 以及国内的很
We
多
might
大模型
use
语言
some
还有一些这个第二
models
行
from
业的
abroad
出
like
现了生成式
ChatGPT
AI，
and
不光
DeepSeek in
是
China.
这个生成式文本，还生成式图
Now,
像这
AI
个
can
音
not
频视
only
频等等
generate
国内
texts,
外
they
的
can
这
also
些
generate
相应的软
images,
件都被开
illustrations,
发
and
了。
videos,
那么尤
and
其是
we
音频，
have
在
a
国内
large
我们
number
像
of
DeepSeek，
softwares
还
for
有
this.
腾讯元宝
This year, we have DeepSeek and Tencent Yuanbao in China, and they are upgraded versions of GAI. They have provided massive possibilities for the application in English teaching. So before 2022, technology was a niche research area in linguistics, but after the emergence of GAI, it has become an important research direction in linguistics, including teaching and learning. Many papers are related to generative AI and large language models. Many scholars and teachers have started to use generative AI in foreign language teaching. Regardless of your prior experience with education technology and AI, everyone can now proficiently use GAI tools into their teaching and learning. And there has been an explosion of research, review articles, and techniques for teaching English with GAI. UNESCO is also promoting the application of GAI for teachers, and it has laid out a structure of AI competency for teachers. Teachers should be designers and facilitators. They should guide the students to use it, and they should also be a role model and lifelong learner. Just as students, teachers should also learn how can they use AI in a better way.
同时呢，这个 AI 实际上还是以人文本叫以人文中心，因为它
Still, AI should focus on human. We should have a human-centered mindset because it's only a technology and tool, no matter how developed it is. So there are three phases. The first phase is to acquire the techniques. And the second phase is to deepen the use of AI into teaching. And the third phase is to create innovative approaches to use AI. And they could also develop their own language model. Each of the teachers can create their own AI agent. They can be used for evaluating writing and speaking. There is also a framework for AI competency for students. They should also have a human-centered mindset. They should first learn and then apply AI systems in their studies. Many students have started to use AI tools to improve their writing and speaking. They can also have dialogues with artificial intelligence. And the third phase is also to create. Some students can use their own AI agent to establish their own system. So I'll take the practices at CES Liverpool University as an example. I will demonstrate how higher education institutes in China promote the use of GAI in their teaching. We have developed an AI platform called Jumo, and many universities have their own similar platforms. In many universities, we have started courses related to AI. For example, AI engineering, AI plus architecture, AI plus finance, AI plus humanities and social sciences. So we have AI and applied linguistics, AI and language teaching, and AI and applied linguistics. We have courses in our master's degrees. And of course, this is still a micro course. It is clear that Chinese universities have made full use of artificial intelligence in the new courses. So how can we use AI to empower language teaching? First, we can use existing language models, tell them what we want to do. what is the goal and what level of content and exercises should be included. They can all be generated with large language models. And we can also use large language models to generate videos, PPT slides, and illustrations. And they can be used to create more vivid and interesting teaching materials. Let me give you an example. Before, when we try to learn vocabulary, we simply come and continue to repeat them until we can memorize them. But now that we have large language models, we can change the way of memorizing vocabulary. We can use the new English words to create a reading article at a specific level of proficiency. It could be about science or culture. And it can also generate a reading comprehension question based on the article and provide an answer. Using these words, large language model can also create some audios, videos, and conversations. This can all help students to learn and create. If we simply ask students to memorize the words and do the test, it would be much better for students themselves to create an article, a video, or an audio to practice themselves. AI can also help us in discussions, role plays, and dialogues. GAI can also give some feedback on our vocabulary and speaking abilities. This is a platform I have developed based on AI. It aims at helping students to improve their speaking skills. Of course, it can be used by teachers. We have this website, app, and WeChat mini program. So this is what our team has developed based on deep learning. Now we have over 16,000 users in China. So we can provide feedback for their readings. We also introduced some virtual avatar to ask questions for a more vivid and realistic experience. And we have speeches generated with different accents.
Increasing the punishment of academic dishonesty and adding it to the law. Why or why not?
With generative AI, we can add different accents to the speech so that our students can get used to different cultures. So this is also a very interesting practice. So what we have just heard is Indian accent. For IELTS exams, we can also provide feedbacks for students using our platform. With generative AI, we can provide more detailed feedbacks in different aspects. For example, if you want to know more about fluency, you can click the button and then you will get very detailed feedback. Other dimensions include grammar, fluency, and coherence. So these are some very detailed feedbacks on grammar. We put the into the data of the model to train the model that the large language model can give more detailed feedbacks. We use Chinese in the system because it makes it easier for Chinese to understand the problems. If we use English, it might be slightly more difficult for Chinese students, and it would be better to provide feedback in the native language. We can also have free talks. We have designed different topics. It would create an atmosphere of a classroom where students can talk about different topics with AI. If you simply talk with ChatGPT, there wouldn't be any topic, and with topics, it will have a better effect on students' learning. So this is how we conduct theme-based dialogues. Because if you simply talk to DeepSeek, you might not know what you can talk about. So we have a theme designed in the platform that we use. We can also give feedback on writing. It's also trained by feedbacks provided from human teachers. These are some suggestions and feedbacks about vocabulary.
There
are many platforms for generating videos, and these are some websites that we can use. There are some video generating platforms developed in China. So many of our students are using these platforms. So I will present an example here. It is created by our students. 在阳光明媚的一天，爱丽丝和姐姐坐在河岸上，她听到了什么声音？她看到一只白色的兔子穿着衣服走过去了。哦天哪，我要迟到了，她说。她拿出了自己的怀表，看了看时间。So when we were making this video, we want the students to practice critical thinking. Sometimes we need to make adjustments to the video, and then we will come up with more prompts so that the artificial intelligence can refine the video for our use. So in summary, GI can be used to different aspects in foreign language teaching, including identifying grammar mistakes, providing feedbacks in listening and writing. It can also generate some reference for materials. Of course, we need to make sure that our actions are in line with morality. It requires teachers to take approaches to guide students when they learn how they can use AI systems. That's all for my speech. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Zhou. AI is shaping language education at an unprecedented speed, and it makes language learning more intelligent, efficient, and personalized. The internationalization of Chinese teaching is also an important topic. So now, let's invite Professor Chai Jing from Shanghai New York University. She teaches Chinese to foreign students, and she has taken positions in many foreign universities. She studies second language acquisition, cross-cultural communication, experiential learning, and technology-assisted teaching. She is also a certified Mandarin proficiency tester. She has a team named I Got One, which adopts a cross-cultural perspective and a crowdsourcing approach that gathers Chinese learners from all over the world to share their unique insights on an interactive digital platform. It has built an interactive community for Chinese learning. and provide new paths for cross-cultural understanding and the global promotion of Chinese language education. Now let's give the floor to Professor Chai. Thank you for your introduction. Today, I am here to talk about a story and a cross-cultural research project. So now, I Show Speed has become very popular. We proudly showcase 5,000 years of Chinese culture to foreigners attracted by him, including calligraphy, kung fu, cuisine, and clothing. We watch their reactions, amazement, confusion, and enlightenment. The emotional roller coaster is addictive. But have we truly considered whether the way we express Chinese culture aligns with the cognitive conventions of foreigners of speaking English or other foreign languages? What is lost in translation and what is cultural barrier? When foreigners accept this cross-cultural information, what actually happens in their mental dark box as they process it? As a frontline international Chinese teacher, my daily work is to teach international students about Chinese language and culture. Half of the students at the Shanghai New York University are international students from over 80 countries and regions. On campus, you can hear more than 50 different languages. Chinese is a mandatory course for all students. So in learning, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, which is the toughest nut to crack for foreign learners when they come to learn Chinese? Of course, it is characters. They call it impossible Chinese characters. It seems easy to understand that Chinese characters are difficult because compared to other languages that use alphabetic systems, Chinese characters are different in terms of shape, logic, and number. Even the Arabic alphabet only has 30 letters. But wait, does different necessarily means difficult? What are exactly the challenges for foreigners when they try to learn Chinese characters? Let's go into the classroom. In the beginner's first lesson, the teacher explains the system of Chinese characters, pictographs, ideographs, and phonetic characters. We also teach phrases such as, "What is your name? I'm a student." So just when everything seems clear, a student would suddenly ask, "So why is 时 written with a character that looks like a person? Why does the character 是 have the sun radical? How is it related to the sun?" As a native speaker, do you have any answers for this? Of course, we could check the origins of the characters, but ask yourself, when I learn English, when I find something I don't understand, would you check its origin in Latin? The history of Chinese characters goes too deep and ancient. Even the same character may have different forms. So Chinese characters seem to be logical and systematic, but there are so many uncertainties and exceptions. So students will always have such questions when they try to learn Chinese. For example, why is Ting listen written with the mouth radical instead of the ear radical? Why is the Ji character with extreme written with the wood radical? As an experienced Chinese teacher, I simply throw these questions back at the students and ask how they interpret these characters. Can you see the presentation fine? I get some feedback that they're not seeing the presentation. Well, anyway, you can still listen to what I'm saying. So when we talk about the character Ji, which means extreme, there are two radicals. The first one is wood, mu. The second one is Ji. So I don't have the answer for the question, and I would throw the question back. I got an answer which I didn't expect. They told me that the wood radical represents a tree, and the radical Ji on the right-hand side resembles the letter B in uppercase. So Ji means be extreme. At first, I laughed it off, but then I noticed that other students seemed to be quite inspired, and weeks later they still remembered it. I suddenly realized a different way of perceiving Chinese characters compared to native speakers. For us, it's something acquired. It happens naturally. However, as foreign learners, they have to make deliberate effort to unlock as many cognitive channels as possible. As a teacher, I aim to design lessons that combine both, and I want to encourage the occurrence of acquisition. For example, the character Ya, it has two radicals, mouth and tooth. We can infer its meaning and its pronunciation. Students think of the ancient Egyptian symbol of Horus eye, and the character 蛇, which means snake, on the left-hand side is related to cobra 眼镜蛇, which is also related to 眼 eye. And a UN student associated the character 电, meaning electricity, with the shape of a kite, which reminds him of Franklin's kite experiment. For the character 空, many students say that it looks like a panda's face, and overseas, the most famous panda is, of course, Kung Fu Panda. And the pronunciation of Kong is similar to this Chinese character. The upper part of the character Hui, which means meeting, made one student think of a pyramid. And there is also a term called pyramid scheme, which literally refers to a scam like a pyramid. And it's basically like an endless series of meetings. So they are making many associations when they try to memorize Chinese characters. They link the sound, shape, pop culture, personal experience, and interdisciplinary knowledge to create new anchor points for new knowledge. Because of their diverse background, they often have multiple memory paths for the same character. For example, for the character Ye, meaning career or profession, the first student associated with a successful person raising their hands and shouting yay. The second student from Mexico thinks that this character resembled a plant called agave, which is used to make tequila. Both growing and brewing it require a lot of professional skills. For the character man, which means slow, one student thought of the way of describing slowness in their culture, which is similar to Chinese saying turtle speed. Another student thought of an old man, where the English word man has the same pronunciation as the characters pinyin man. For the character gua, meaning melon, a student from Singapore thought of the tropical papaya. When it's cut in half, it resembles the shape of the character gua. Another student matches the strokes of the character with English letters. It's an M and an L. They are combined to form the word melon, which also means gua. We have over 6,000 examples like this, but we don't stop here. In addition to collection and visual transformation, we hope it can serve as a bridge for international students to go into Chinese communities. So we talk about Chinese characters, we talk about the I Got One project, and we establish a mutual cultural understanding to practice reciprocal experiential learning. Of course, international students benefit from communication with Chinese students in terms of their language skills and cognition. However, we hope that this altruism is reciprocal. Chinese students also want to improve their English skills, but when our students speak Chinese, what can they give back to the community? It is the opportunity for frontline experience of cross-cultural interaction. They can experience individualized and differentiated intercultural communication. So I always use this example. As a Chinese person, please read the following characters. Do you feel uncomfortable? 红, 黄, 蓝, 绿, 白. So why do you feel uncomfortable? We call it semantic saturation. As a native speaker, the relationship between the shape and meaning of these characters have become so close, and there is no room for any gaps. But to foreigners, for example, the character Bai for white looks like an apple, and it reminds them of Snow White, who ate the poison apple. So this cross-cultural perspective can open up a gap in semantic saturation, which inspires innovation and creativity. That is precisely a source of romance and beauty. Chinese characters are beautiful in form, in the fusion of the concrete and abstract. They can represent the fleeting nature of folk art and cross-cultural perspectives like the Kung Fu Panda or the melon, as I just mentioned. Chinese characters carry the way we understand the world. Periods, square faces shaped like the character Guo, wrinkles shaped like the character Chuan. So let us imagine, in the barren desert of the Middle East, when they express rest, will they still be describing a character where a person is leaned against a tree? In a different cultural context, what we take for granted might all be different. For Chinese, through Chinese characters, we can also see the diversified elements through the lens of Chinese characters. I believe that true cultural confidence is to invite people to see us in different ways. And this is where culture inclusiveness shines through. I hope everyone has the opportunity to engage in cross-cultural experiences. And in this process, we will have the opportunity to explore our own relationship with our own culture. If you'd like to know more about our stories, please feel free to follow our WeChat or RedNote QR codes. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Chai, for your brilliant talk. So we have discovered the beauty of Chinese characters and the potential of Chinese language teaching in promoting cross-cultural exchange. Now, let's move on to the perspective of cross-cultural exchange in the era of digital intelligence and proprietary leadership. Let's give the floor to Professor Hong Zhaohui. He has taught in 4 U.S. universities, and he participated in the establishment of the business school at Fordham University. He studies digital humanity, economic history, and leadership. He has published many articles and monographs. He has been granted over 40 funds for his research. Now let's welcome Professor Hong Zhaohui, who will draw upon history and philosophy to explore the balance of traditional wisdom and modern leadership. Thank you for your introduction. So I will use 15 minutes to talk about what I have published last year. It's called propriety economy. It has raised some concepts and cases about propriety leadership. So today I'd like to talk about how can we apply the principles into education. So we will ask 3 questions. First, why we need propriety. We have entered a world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. VUCA, in short. So we can easily go to extremes. We might feel lost. Propriety has become a necessity for us. And economy philosophy tells us that the more you need it, the more rare it is. And that's why it is valuable. It has created a dilemma for us. The scarcity of propriety has risen a question for us. Why is it too difficult to practice propriety? Why do people tend to go to extremes? I believe it's because it makes our choices easy and efficient. We don't need to make an effort to find our position, and extreme things are usually clear, and they might promote passion. And our mindset determines that it's difficult for us to get rid of extreme ideas. That's why the mindset of selfishness is difficult to get rid of, and it makes propriety even more difficult. So today we talk about propriety leadership and its meaning for education. I believe it's important because it helps us to correct the extremes in education policy, and it improves the character of educators. So what is propriety? I'd like to talk about its philosophical foundations of propriety. It comes from over 2,500 years ago. In the Axle Age, the philosophy of the mean and the philosophy of propriety in the East and West help us establish the foundation for us. Last year, I talked about a shared cultural value at the Harvard Education Symposium. So you might know that Confucius' philosophy is important for the Chinese culture. It stresses moderation, balance, and how can we adjust our own situation according to our external environment. It stresses harmony from moderation. And it is a very Chinese philosophy because it stresses how can we deal with conflicts. And we need the third opinion from a fresh eye. And the number 3 is very important in the Chinese culture. And also, the philosophy of the mean is about making evaluation. If we want to apply the principle of propriety, we have to be able to adjust according to our situation. And the third key point is harmony. At the end of the Ming Dynasty, Wang Fuzhi tried to dissect the characters to understand its meaning. So the key point is to get harmony from moderation. If you want to maintain balance, you have to achieve harmony. And in the West, Aristotle and Adam Smith also had the philosophy of propriety. This part focuses on nurturing the internal characters and values of students, how they understand their own existence. It stresses how we can become a wholesome person. For example, in our school, we have religion, art, culture, literature, and these courses are mandatory for fresh-year students and sophomores. I believe that this is the character that cannot be replaced by AI in the digital age. So this is a third choice of being, except for doing and knowing. So being is the third choice for us. It promotes virtual development. The second principle of propriety is to have the ability and habit to respond to public sentiment. We need to respond to the majority of the teachers, students, parents, and the society. In order to make impartial decisions, education policies cannot stay away from public sentiment. Of course, we need to have the ability to listen to the public sentiment. So how can we make balanced choices? When there are two confronting plans, we might not choose one from the two. We can bring in a third choice for us. In the book, I proposed a model. If we establish a model where we can choose one from three, we can improve the chances by 17% if we can choose two from three. And the second, we can get rid of the dilemma of choosing between two polars by bringing a third choice, and that is propriety. That is what's happening in the curriculum reform. We have integrated the different majors. For example, responsible AI is a very interesting topic. It is not just about exploring AI in terms of technology. We have to make responsible use of AI, and that's why law and ethics are important. And now we are also studying spatial education. We can bring in digital elements into our educational process. And second, we also need to have the courage to reject public opinion. We shouldn't blindly follow public opinions because it's the minority that holds the truth. We usually divide leadership into two confrontational types. The first one is the farmer type. They are in charge of internal affairs, the operation of the school. And the second type is the hunter type. So what do? They usually look at the external environment and they tend to explore. Teachers and students of a school hope the school to be both the farmer and the hunter. And as a principal with proprietary leadership, they cannot blindly follow others. They need to have the courage to do the right thing. And that is what makes the principal a true general of the troop. And you also need the ability to do things right, except for doing the right thing. We need to focus on the procedure and the details. So either the farmer or the hunter is not a compound talent. The compound talent is a rider. They can hunt on the horseback and they can use the horse to work in the land. So sometimes we need to have the determination to correct excessive bias. because excessive intervention might become an excuse to oppose to innovation and revolution. History has proved that people who can achieve great things must have the determination to make their own choices. In times of peace, we need propriety. In times of volatility and revolution, we might have some excessive behaviors because an excessive amount of excessiveness could be a form of propriety. So it's difficult to understand the propriety, and it's even more difficult to put it into practice. That's why we need to make more efforts in this area. Thank you for your insights. A globalization is continuing to evolve, and cross-cultural leadership is more important than ever. I believe that now you have an entirely new understanding of cross-cultural and multilingual education. Now let's invite back the 4 guest speakers and the co-host Liu Weiwei for the roundtable discussion. Thank you for your introduction. Hi everyone, I'm Tan Weiwei and I am the co-host of this panel. It's my pleasure to have this roundtable discussion with you. So previously, the 4 guest speakers talked about their insights in their different respective areas, and I believe that every one of us is inspired. For the roundtable discussion, we will talk about how cross-cultural communication can facilitate the coexistence of civilization. And I appreciate the answers and comments you have posted in the groups and live streaming. We have chosen a few questions for further discussion. So in your speech, technology was a frequent topic. AI offers unprecedented possibilities for language teaching, but it has also sparked some discussion. So Professor Zhou, do you think technology might have weakened emotional experience in language learning? Do you have any practices or principles emphasizing humanity that you can share? Thank you for your question. No matter how advanced technology is, it is still a tool. It cannot replace human conversations and emotions. At present, the technology of AI cannot talk us like human, especially at the emotional dimension. OpenAI did present a product called Omina, which can communicate just like human. You can interrupt it, you can have it mimic different tones, including for example, the image of a cartoon and sounds. However, the product was only presented once, and we don't have anything similar in China. At present, we can only use AI to train some fundamental linguistic skills, but for communication with emotions, we cannot reach that level of advancement. And I don't have the technical background to add emotional communication to AI tools. However, we can use some existing technology. For example, we can use avatars. In Chinese education in English, we usually use English or American pronunciation. However, when you are studying abroad, maybe you have to communicate with people with African or Argentina accent. So we add the accents into our program development so that our students can be exposed to different accents. We have found that students view different accents as a form of cultural communication, but our usage of AI in human communication is still quite limited. We should still hold a human-centered view. Thank you. So because there are many overseas students in your audience, many have just come to a new environment and they go through a kind of cultural shock or cultural dislocation. we might not have the same value as the rest of the teachers and students, so we feel that it's difficult to get integrated into our community and environment. So Professor Hu, you talked about the importance of cultural empathy. In classrooms, as educators, how can we guide students to establish such abilities? Thank you for your question. This is an essential topic for overseas students, including Chinese students who go to other countries to study, and other students from different countries who have come to China to study. For these two groups, cultural adaptation and multicultural experience have unique benefits and intellectual resources. They might have some potential costs in mental health, and there might even be some side effects. So for cultural psychology, we have established many theories. I will briefly talk about the idea of John Barry, who is a mental psychologist in Canada. So the framework of cultural adaptation derives from migrants, and now it has moved on to cultural mover, the fluid group in the multicultural background. So to what extent can a person be adapted to the host culture while maintaining its own home culture, which is their own cultural heritage? For example, in China, we have very profound cultural heritage, and we suggest that we should adopt the strategy of integration. For what we have learned and experienced, we should integrate the resources to improve our cognitive flexibility in different contexts, with different people, in different dynamics. We can try to adopt the best cultural strategy. And this is what we call person-culture fit. So you need to become the best fit with the cultural way to adapt to the most urgent problems. You might have many cultural toolbox stored in your mind. And in the toolbox, you need to identify what is helpful for you to adapt to the cultural environment, to deal with the difficulties or cultural shocks that you experience. As psychologists, we stress that as individuals, when you meet challenges and obstacles when you study abroad, you don't have to fight alone. You need to seek social support. For example, in your university, there might be some social support centers, and there might be some Chinese teachers or professors who can help you out. And you can also seek help from your friends. If you're working together, it will be a problem, and you can better integrate the resources in the multicultural background. And it can also reduce the negative. A combination of theory and practices will produce a better outcome. Thank you so much for your insights. As Professor Hu mentioned, in cross-cultural and multilingual education, language teaching can be simplified as a tool or cultural label, but we overlook the deeper cultural understanding and identity construction behind the languages. So for Professor Culture, sometimes culture can be labeled. So in your experience, do you have any tips you'd like to share with us to guide students to truly understand culture instead of creating stereotypes? So I often talk about bringing in cultural education in different phases of language teaching. Some people might say that if I'm not proficient in the language, maybe I shouldn't be talking about culture. Actually, in beginner's language class, we can start to teach culture. The key point is to teach it in a proper way. I will guide students to focus on the cultural phenomenon which can be manifested in languages, and this is how I can make them curious. For example, in the first month of our teaching, we will talk about going back home, which means 回家. So we go home at night, 回家. What about in the morning when we leave home? Is it 出家? Now students have so many resources. They can ask Chinese students and they can ask DeepSeek. The problem is they don't know how to find the questions, and this is what we as teachers can help them with. And second, you talked about cultural stereotype. They have stereotypes because they are not sufficiently exposed to the culture and languages of the language they're learning. For Chinese students and foreign students, they can learn from their communication, and it's not just a one-off activity, because only one time of activity wouldn't have lasting impact. How can we identify common interest on both sides and make them communicate in a long-lasting way? This is what we need to think of as a teacher and educator. I believe that if students can have long-lasting communication, the stereotype will be broken. And in the end, I'd like to say we need to guide students to have a deeper understanding of culture. That actually includes their reflection of their own culture and comparison with the foreign culture. So in my classroom, we will teach a concept about containing. And in Chinese, we might say that I'm so hungry, I can eat a cow. So I would ask students, what will you say in your culture? Some people say, well, in our culture, we say, I can eat a horse. And in some culture, they say, I can eat a human. And another example, in Chinese, we say, something cannot be true. If it's true, a pig could climb a tree. So in other cultures, they might say, if this is true, crabs can sing on mountaintops. So this is very interesting for Chinese too, and I'm eager to learn more about it. So that is a cross-cultural communication in our classroom. After we create the exposure of cultural phenomena, teachers should ask the following question. So why are these expressions so different in different cultures? It involves deeper knowledge about history, society, ethics, and culture, which will guide the students to explore the answer in a deeper way. So language should enable students to express themselves and reflect on their own identities. And this comparison can help them learn a foreign language. So in summary, we should embrace the diversity of cultures. And I think that is what's best about language lessons. Thank you for your interesting insights. Yes, we should embrace diversity in harmony. So the next question is for Professor Ho. You talked about the what, why, and how of propriety. So how can we apply propriety leadership into the cross-cultural and multilingual environment? And how can we nurture the new generation of leadership with propriety? Well, this is a tough question. So cross-cultural and multilingual education is a global topic. We want to have efficient communication in different cultural backgrounds. So in the past 10 years, since 2015, Fordham University has cooperated with Peking University in a program for finance and management. So we need 6 abilities. So I have to be brief here. If you are interested, please feel free to check my book or our website. The first ability is multilinguistic abilities. It can be achieved through bilingual classrooms and the summer camps in New York for language learning to improve their ability to apply their linguistic skills. It's not only about English or Chinese learning. We also encourage them to study regional languages such as slangs or dialects. And that's how they can have a better understanding of the multicultural environment. We also stress the ability of occupational languages. For example, legal English and finance English. Because we are a Catholic university, we also put a premium on theology and ethics. And the second ability is cognitive and adaptation skills, including cultural sensitivity. In a different culture, some students might feel that I have no idea why I'm losing. That's because we don't have the sensitivity towards the local culture. We want them to understand the values and the ways of thinking. Also, students need to adapt to different cultural environments, different communication styles, different social etiquettes. And of course, we stress the training of critical thinking in different cultural backgrounds. They need to be independent in their thinking process. For example, in my classroom, I encourage students to raise questions. And that's the only way they can get an A in my class. So Aristotle said that I love my teacher, but I love truth more. So the third ability is cross-cultural communication, including nonverbal communication, which is essential. They need to learn about body languages in different cultures, especially how to make eye contacts. It improves the accuracy of cross-cultural communication. They also need the management abilities to deal with cross-cultural conflicts. And that brings me back to the topic of propriety. This is important, especially in remote communication. So the fourth ability is the global vision, or the ability to adapt to diversified cultures. For example, they can design international courses and international cases to deal with things like climate change. We also encourage students to engage in international communication and develop what we call competence. They are exposed to different disciplines such as management and economy to improve their understanding of global issues. The fifth one is practical language application. We provide students with opportunities to work in different environments. For example, when students come to the US, we give them a tour in the UN or West Point. They can observe how they work and they can improve their teamwork abilities. It will improve their competitiveness in their future career. And in some case studies, we also have some simulations to provide a space for students to practice their cross-cultural abilities and skills. It can improve their flexibility. And the last one is the ability to get policy support. For example, you need the government to make favorable policies to encourage cross-cultural communication, and you need to have the ability to lobby them to realize the importance of cross-cultural communication and the importance of such projects. In summary, cross-cultural and multilingual education is about language ability, cognition, global vision, application, and policy support. And they need to be combined in a way that promotes propriety. So college education is not only about knowing and doing. We should emphasize being. Only the balance between the three, which integrates the features of farmer, hunter, and rider leadership, can we nurture real talents which have their competitiveness in the multi-global world. Of course, it's easier said than done, so I prefer hands-on education, and we need to take actions. Thank you. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Hong, and I'd like to thank the 4 guest speakers for their inspiration on multilingual education and cross-cultural understanding. I believe that through today's roundtable discussion, you have a more comprehensive understanding of cross-cultural and multilingual education. And we now know that how can education become a bridge for us in the diverse world. Thank you for your insights, and that is all for the roundtable discussion. Thank you for your participation. And now let's invite back Jia Shen. Thank you so much for your speech. We have thought about the deeper connection between language, cultures, and education. We call on more educators and practitioners to stress the cultural value behind language learning. And I hope that you can find more common ground in different cross-cultural communications. And I'd like to thank the 4 guest speakers and all the volunteers. Now let's give the floor back to Valentina. I'd like to thank the co-host and the guest speakers of this panel. That is all for this panel. Please continue to follow us, and the next panel will be Future Innovation Education panel. I'll see you then.